Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Oregon State Treasurer made headlines, vowing to cut financial ties with Russia. But 2 years later, KGW found those promises have been unfulfilled. The state is still sitting on millions of dollars in Russian investments while the war rages on. And in late February, President Biden called for new sanctions on Russia after the death of opposition leader Alexei Navalny in a Siberian prison. Russian investments represent just a tiny fraction of Oregon's $93 billion pension fund portfolio for government retirees. Even so, Oregon's treasurer, Tobias Reed, directed staff to divest from Russia. The situation in Ukraine is serious, tragic, and growing more desperate by the day, Reed said in March of 2022. Oregon, along with many other states that vowed to sell off Russian investments, found it wasn't so easy. Russia's economy had been cut off from the rest of the world, making it nearly impossible to divest, and the value of those assets plummeted. Oregon's Russian investments were valued at roughly $137 million in March of 2022 and $67 million a month later. By June of 2023, the state's Russian assets had shrunk to $49 million. Tom Sanzillo of the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis is a former first deputy comptroller for the state of New York.
As a former fund administrator, there's no fund in the country that can move with the lightning speed of the news cycle. And so it's a little unrealistic in that respect.
According to a spokesperson for the state treasurer, fund managers continue to attempt to sell shares and not purchase any new shares of Russian assets. But no benchmarks or deadlines have been set for the state to divest. Treasurer Reed declined multiple requests for an interview.
I would say I'm disappointed that I see very few reports coming out as follow-up, and there should be. It's not a proper administrative response to say nothing.
The situation with Russia highlights long-standing questions about the risk of investing with certain countries and the state's role in socially responsible investing. In the mid-1980s, the legislature required the state to divest in companies doing business in South Africa due to apartheid. In 2005, it took similar action when Sudan was accused of atrocities in its fight against rebels in Darfur. Currently, the Oregon legislature is considering a bill that would divest from coal, but not oil and gas. The goal is to reduce greenhouse gases responsible for climate change. Washington state took a similar position on Russia. It, too, planned to get rid of roughly $100 million in assets linked to Russia. 2 years later, the state admits it's still holding Russian investments, but wouldn't provide their estimated value. Kyle Aboshi, KGW News.